How many of you were here when I preached my first Easter homily 7 years ago? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you remember what I talked about? You don't? You dirty tings, you don't remember nothing, did I tell you? Well, for those of you who were here and have a good memory, you can take a snooze. The rest of you pay attention, because I'm going to repeat the homily that I gave 7 years ago. I talked about the three most remarkable and memorable celebrations of Easter that I've ever had as a priest. Not necessarily the three most beautiful, because every celebration of the Triduum is the most beautiful. I've said for years, you can tell the health of a parish, how vibrant a parish is, by number one, the way they celebrate the Triduum, and number two, the way they celebrate their funerals. That's the hallmark of how good a parish is. This parish gets an A+ on both of them, okay? But the three most remarkable Easters I ever celebrated were 3 years in a row. The 3 years I was studying in Rome. The first year, 1983, many years ago, I had the privilege of celebrating Holy Week in the Holy Land. And on Palm Sunday, we were in Nazareth and celebrated Palm Sunday in the beautiful basilica dedicated to the Blessed Mother in Nazareth. Later that week, for the Triduum, we came to Jerusalem. On Holy Thursday night, we celebrated the Mass of the Lord's Supper in the Greek Catholic Patriarchal Church, which was the closest we could get to where the upper room traditionally was located. We were accompanied on that trip. It was actually led by a Jesuit who, among all things, was an archaeologist. And he decided that he had to share his scientific knowledge with us. So every place we went, he would say, "Is this really the place where Jesus multiplied the loaves and the fishes?" All the arrows point, and he's going on and on and on, boring us to death. Boring us to death. So on Holy Thursday night, after we finished Mass, we followed as closely as we could in the modern city the route that Jesus took and the apostles to go to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is still existent. We came to a certain place called San Pietro in Gallicanto, St. Peter of the Cockcrow, and there was a flight of stairs. And this guy just says to us, this Jesuit just says to us very simply, without any fanfare, there is no question whatsoever among scholars that Jesus of Nazareth walked down these stairs on the way to the Garden of Gethsemane. And for once, he shut up. And we were able to sit. Most of us were crying, we were laughing, we were praying, and we sat there for the better part of an hour, just trying to visualize Christ walking down those stairs. On Good Friday, we had Mass at the tomb of Jesus in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And then on Sunday, we had a Mass in the Roman Catholic chapel in the same Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Church of the Holy Sepulchre is all divided up between these Christian denominations, and the Catholics have one section of it. So it's a very, very moving experience. Even today, I cannot read the scriptures, the Gospels, without visualizing the different places we saw. And one of the beautiful things, especially from my diocese, is that the geography of our diocese is so very similar to the Holy Land. So, for example, at one point we were at Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus said to Peter, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." And we got out of the bus, and I looked around, I said, "Glory be to God, I'm in Keams Canyon, Arizona." It looked exactly like Keams Canyon. So that reinforces this beautiful, beautiful imagery that I have whenever I hear the various gospel passages. So that was the first Easter. The second Easter was the exact opposite, because we spent Easter in the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. And that year, 1984, was a very interesting year for a couple of reasons. First of all, the Russian Orthodox Easter and the Roman Catholic Easter that year coincided. They were the same day. Usually the Orthodox are behind us because they follow a different calendar. But every so often, every 4 or 5 years, the dates coincide. That year, 1984, Easter fell on April 21st. And if you were a good communist, April 21st is Lenin's birthday. So everybody was celebrating. And we didn't ask too many specific questions. Who are you honoring? Are you honoring Jesus or are you honoring Lenin? No, we just were happy everybody was in a good mood. But we went to Good Friday services at one of the 2 Russian Orthodox seminaries that the communists would allow in the entire country. And then we went around. The only thing they could show us by way of tourist places of interest were churches. Of course, the churches were all museums now. So we said, well, we want to see a functioning church. Well, they kept putting us off. They didn't want to show us a functioning church. So Easter Sunday, we were staying at a hotel in a place called Suzdal. And we had made arrangements to have Mass in the dining room of the hotel at 9 o'clock in the morning. 10 minutes to 9, we go down to celebrate Mass. The dining room is locked, and nobody has a key. So I went up to the girl behind the desk, whom I had heard speaking perfect English the night before. And I said to her, I know you understand English, so I'm going to tell you once. Either open that dining room within 5 minutes, or we will be very happy to celebrate Mass right here in the lobby and let everybody see and join us. Well, they scrambled around. The dining room got opened. And then they said, you have a half an hour and no more. And one of our guys started objecting, one of the priests. I was with a group of priests. One of them started objecting, well, we can't do it in half an hour. I said, no, we'll do it, that's okay, that's fine. And then I said to him afterwards, I said, hey, once we get in there, what are they going to do, shoot us to get us out? We'll take as long as we want. Sure enough, after a half an hour, they started banging on the pots and pans and everything in the kitchen, which was right next to the dining room. And the more they banged, the slower we went. That was Easter in the Soviet Union. But the most remarkable time, on Tuesday after Easter, we got on the bus. And by this time, I was getting a little sick of all this propaganda stuff we were getting, because all the guides they had were communists, of course. They were in-tourist guides. So I said to the guy getting on the bus, well, what are we going to see today? Some ball bearing factory? And he says, no, we're going to a functioning church. We got all excited. We go into this church. There were 20 little old ladies, all dressed in black, just glaring at us. And I mean, they had hatred in their eyes and contempt. And we figured, We didn't do anything. We're just here to see your church. What are you so upset about? Well, it turns out that in preparation for May Day, which is a great communist celebration, all these communist delegations from all over the world were coming to the Soviet Union. And they were taking them on tours of the churches. And of course, the people knew they were atheists, they were communists, they had no business being in the church. That's why we were getting the glares. Until one of our priests who spoke Russian goes up and used the same words that I used at the start of Mass. Christos voskresni. Christ has risen. And the old lady looked at him, and she made the response. And then she said, well, who are these people? He said, they're priests. First thing she says is, where are their beards? Because all Russian Orthodox priests have long beards. Where are their beards? They said, well, they're not Russian Orthodox. They're Roman Catholic priests. Well, that didn't make any, she didn't know what the difference was, but as long as they were priests. Immediately, the transformation was instant. And from the scowls and the looks of hatred was the smiles and friendliness, and they got each of us, and they started jabbering away to each of us. We didn't know what they were saying, but we knew exactly what they were saying. And they were smuggling Easter eggs to us, beautifully colored Easter eggs, which they traditionally do for Easter as a sign of the resurrection. Okay? The transformation caused by two words, the power of those words, Christ is risen, to people of faith. So that was the second year in the Soviet Union. The third year, St. Peter's in Rome with Pope John Paul II. On Palm Sunday, we were in there, and that happened to be Palm Sunday in 1985 was the first World Youth Day. And they had no idea how many kids were going to show up in Rome. Turned out there were close to 500,000 the very first time. Close to 500,000. That was also the year that Pope John Paul decided we were going to do away with these dinky palms. So he equips all of the priests with 8-foot palms, and we're walking along in procession behind these palms. And all I could do was quote scripture from the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus cures the blind man, and he says, "Can you see?" The blind man responds, "I see men moving, but they look like walking trees." And that's exactly what we looked at. Well, we're in the middle of the square, surrounding the Holy Father, who was in the process of blessing the palms. And because we're carrying these stupid 8-foot palms, the people in back of us can't see a thing. Right? So leave it to the American kids. They start up, down with the palms, down with the palms. We lower the palms. Finally, the priest got the message. We lowered the palms. This great big cheer goes up. And the Holy Father looks over with this scowl on his face. "What are you making so much noise for?" Well, he didn't understand. That was Palm Sunday. The other thing that happened on Palm Sunday was that morning I had celebrated Mass with the Missionaries of Charity at San Gregorio, and Mother Teresa was there. And I had the privilege over the course of 3 years of celebrating Mass with Mother Teresa, probably about 5 or 7 times, something like that. And Mother had a custom that she had all kinds of people who wanted to meet her and talk to her after Mass. She wouldn't talk to anybody until she talked to the priest who celebrated the Mass, if he wanted to talk to her. So the first time I did, but then I would tell her secretary, I said, a lot of people want to see Mother. I've met her. I've had the privilege of meeting her. She doesn't have to wait on me to go. So she went. Well, on this one Sunday, I had Mass with her at San Gregorio at 6:30 in the morning. I don't know why the Missionaries of Charity think that the only time to celebrate Mass is 6:30 in the morning. But they do. The Pope had Mass at St. Peter's at 11 in the morning. and Mother Teresa was there again. This time, however, she is sitting in the VIP section, up with the cardinals and everything. Guess who they have her sitting next to? Imelda Marcos. Who else? You know, the lady with all the shoes? And I thought to myself, glory be to God, what a church. Imelda Marcos and Mother Teresa. Imelda's fingering her diamond rosaries, and Mother Teresa is sitting there looking like a pile of rags. But that was to be able to celebrate Easter and the Triduum with the Pope in Rome was an unforgettable experience. So those are the three memorable celebrations of Easter. Not the most beautiful necessarily, but very, very memorable. And that, dear hearts, was the homily I gave you 7 years ago. Kindly remember it, so I don't have to repeat it 7 years from now, if I'm still alive. In any case, the faith that we share in the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a faith shared all over the world, in radically different circumstances, in radically different ways, but all the same. Christ is risen, and that makes all the difference. Got it? Good.